The wind rolled across the open Montana plains like a wandering ghost, carrying dust, silence, and secrets the land had learned to keep. Ethan Rourke pushed his hat lower as the sun dipped behind the distant buttes, turning the sky into a river of fire. His horse, Marley, trotted steady beneath him, hooves thudding on the dry earth with a rhythm that matched the uneasy beating in Ethan's chest. He shouldn't have been this nervous. He wasn't riding into a gunfight. He wasn't chasing down a wild steer. He wasn't even facing the county sheriff for some bar fight he didn't quite remember. No, he was simply on his way to pick up a woman. A mail-order bride. A bride meant for another man. His best friend, to be exact. It should have been easy. A simple favor. A ride into town and back. A handshake. A polite welcome. Nothing more. But somehow, it felt like he was stepping into something larger than himself, something he couldn't yet name. The same uneasy feeling had followed him for days, whispering that this small errand might change everything. He told himself it was nonsense. Just nerves because his friend had asked for a big favor. Or maybe because he'd never been around a mail-order bride before. He'd met plenty of women at barn dances, rodeos, saloons, and Sunday gatherings, but a woman who crossed states to marry a man she had never met. That was something different, something that felt delicate, and fragile, and a little heartbreaking. Ethan wasn't sure what kind of woman would agree to something so desperate. But he'd soon find out. He nudged Marley forward as the town of Clearwater Creek appeared like a smudge of civilization on the wide landscape. Smoke rose from chimneys, lanterns glowed in windows, and the sound of a piano drifted faintly from the saloon. Horses nickering, wagons clattering, men shouting greetings. It was a place he'd known all his life, yet tonight, it felt unfamiliar. As he rode down Main Street, several folks nodded at him. "Evenin', Ethan Rourke. Tell your pa I got that fence rail ready for him." He lifted a hand in polite acknowledgement, but he didn't stop. He was running late. The train had arrived nearly an hour ago, and his friend's bride would be waiting at the station. His friend, Isaac Turner. A good man, kind-hearted, loyal, soft-spoken and shy. He had shown Ethan nothing but brotherhood since they were boys, and Ethan had never once had reason to doubt him. Isaac had dreamed of a wife for years but had been too timid to court any woman in town, convinced none would choose him. Then he'd begun writing letters to a woman back east. A mail-order bride arrangement. Her name was supposed to be Charlotte Whitmore. The letters had grown serious. Promises were exchanged. Hopes. Plans. Isaac had been glowing like a lantern ever since. And when her reply arrived saying she was on her way to Montana, he'd practically danced in the barn. But the morning she was due to arrive, Isaac had woken with a terrible fever. Couldn't stand. Could barely breathe. He'd looked pale as a ghost. "Ethan, I can't leave her waiting at the station. Please. Go for me. Bring her home." Of course Ethan had agreed. He would never abandon a friend in need. But as he reached the station platform, his pulse quickened. Passengers stood around waiting for luggage. Some were already hugging family. A few drifted into town, carrying their hopes and travel-worn suitcases. The station lanterns glowed warm against the growing dusk. And then he saw her. Or who he thought must be her. A young woman in a dusty blue dress stood beside a wooden trunk almost as big as she was. Her brown hair spilled in gentle waves over her shoulders, tangled from the wind of travel. She wasn't delicate the way he expected a mail-order bride to be. She was striking. Not because she was perfect or polished, but because there was something fiercely alive in her eyes, something resilient. But those eyes were scanning the crowd with uncertainty. Someone vulnerable searching for the face of a stranger she was supposed to marry. Something tugged deep in Ethan's chest. He tightened his jaw. No, not for me. For Isaac. He stepped off Marley and approached her. "Miss Whitmore," he called gently. She startled, turned, and her breath caught just slightly when her gaze landed on him. Her eyes were a deep amber, warm as autumn sunlight yet shining with a storm of nerves. "Why yes," she said. "I'm Charlotte." Her voice trembled with both exhaustion and hope. Ethan tried not to let his expression soften too much. He tipped his hat. "I'm Ethan Rourke. Isaac Turner is a dear friend of mine. He asked me to fetch you." Relief washed across her face so clearly it almost hurt to see. "Oh, thank goodness, I was beginning to think no one was coming." "I'm sorry for the wait," he said. "Isaac took ill this morning. Nothing too serious, just a fever. He'll be pleased to meet you once he's better." Her lips parted with concern. He's sick. Oh dear, I hope it's not from overworking. His letters sounded so earnest. And kind. Tired sometimes, but always trying so hard to do the right thing. Ethan nodded. That sounds like Isaac. Charlotte lowered her gaze, brushing her fingers over the worn handle of her trunk. I suppose he works his ranch alone. He's got me and a couple of hired hands, but yes, he shoulders a lot. She smiled, soft and genuine. Then I'll be glad to help him once I'm settled. Ethan swallowed. Something about the quiet certainty in her voice, her willingness to build a life alongside a stranger, stirred a feeling he hadn't expected. Respect. Admiration. Something dangerous. He pushed it away and reached for her trunk. Let me help you with this. It's heavy, she warned. I've hauled heavier. But when he lifted it, the weight nearly ripped his arms from their sockets. Lowered above, he muttered. You bring in rocks. She flushed. Books. He blinked. Books. She nodded with a sheepish smile. I couldn't leave them behind. My whole world is in there. He grunted, shifting the trunk onto his shoulder. Well, he supposed that made sense. Together they walked toward Marley. Ethan secured the trunk, helped her mount the horse, and climbed up behind her. When his arms braced around her to hold the reins, he froze, suddenly aware of how close they were. Her shoulders tensed for a heartbeat, then slowly relaxed. Is the ride far? She asked. About an hour. She nodded. I'm glad I came early. I was worried I might not reach Montana before winter set in. Ethan flicked the reins. You made it just fine. They rode through the cooling evening, silence stretching between them like a thin thread. Ethan cleared his throat, struggling for polite conversation. How was the journey? A bit lonely, she said softly. But necessary. He hesitated. If you don't mind me asking, why did you agree to something like this? A mail-order marriage. She didn't answer right away. He nearly apologized, thinking he'd overstepped. But then she whispered. Because sometimes, you just want a place where you won't be invisible. He stared ahead, surprised by the quiet ache in her voice. My sister married a wealthy businessman, she continued. My father remarried a woman who despised me. I was always the extra mouth, the extra obligation. Not that they said it outright, but you can feel when you don't belong, Mr. Rourke. It's a cold thing. Ethan's chest tightened. You belong somewhere, he said gently. She gave a small, grateful smile. Without turning her head. I hope so. They rode in silence, the world around them growing dark and peaceful. Crickets chirped. The moon rose. And Ethan felt, for reasons he couldn't explain, that this woman was more than he expected. More than Isaac expected. But she wasn't his to think about. She was promised to another. By the time they reached Isaac's ranch, lamplight glowed from the window. Smoke curled from the chimney. The house looked warm and welcoming, just like Isaac himself. Ethan helped Charlotte down and carried her trunk inside. Isaac lay on the bed, pale but awake, propped on pillows. His eyes widened when they entered. Miss Whitmore, you're here, he whispered. Charlotte smiled tenderly. Mr. Turner, I'm glad to finally meet you. Her voice was soft and sweet in the lamplit room. Isaac lifted a trembling hand. She took it gently between both of hers. Something warm and aching settled in Ethan's stomach. It was a good match. They fit. They looked right together. He should have felt relieved. But instead, he felt something that made him want to grit his teeth. He set her trunk by the wall and turned to leave, needing air. Distance. Sense. But before he reached the door, Isaac spoke. Ethan, stay a moment. He paused and looked back. Isaac's gaze flicked between him and Charlotte, and he smiled faintly. I want to thank you. For bringing her. For everything. Ethan nodded. You'd do the same for me. Isaac lowered his head back onto the pillow. I hope someday I can repay you. Ethan forced a smile. Seeing you happy will be enough. Charlotte glanced between them, sensing something she couldn't name. Perhaps it was the way Ethan stood a little too stiffly. Or the way his eyes softened when he looked at Isaac. Or maybe the faint sadness lingering beneath his polite smile. She didn't know what to make of it. But Ethan, he knew. He knew that something inside him shifted the moment he saw her. And he didn't know how to stop it. He stepped outside into the cool night, letting the door close behind him. The stars stretched endless above, the air biting against his heated thoughts. What was happening to him? Why did he feel this way? He barely knew her, but he knew enough. He knew she had strength in her gaze, warmth in her voice, hope in her heart despite the world's coldness. He knew that when she looked at Isaac, she smiled with sincerity. And he knew, Lord help him, that she wasn't meant for him. He rubbed a hand over his face, gripping the porch railing. Get your head straight, Ethan, he whispered to himself. She ain't yours. And she never will be. But as the door behind him opened and Charlotte stepped out to ask where she could fetch water, Ethan realized he was already in trouble far deeper than he could admit. And he had no idea how much deeper it would get.